It's Saturday, January 22nd, 2022. I'm sitting here in the middle of something called coronavirus, an Omicron, COVID, human words that have never been spoken until this time frame. So it gets confusing. I'm age 43. I'm in a position where I've gone out in the world in order to try to just sustain privately my life, like secure really a residence that is private for myself to raise the four or the three children that I had, finding it incredibly difficult in what path or what doors were opened, very few, a lot. It just feels like everything was just cut off in the state of New York. Not quite why. Not quite sure why. I've been in corporations, Chase, Merrill Lynch, before it became Bank of America. I've worked in the corporate world, but not in an echelon of, like, Jamie Dimon and I did not have lunch together. It was whatever was on the floor of the branch that ran the regular people side of the bank, not the hoity-toity, I suppose is the proper word for those taken care of. I've heard other humans use, again, not conversational words I've ever used, more of a descriptive purpose in sublingual, like a category of urban but metropolitan to this area, perhaps. I don't think it's something that's taught in classes. So I'm watching the television, and yesterday there was a conversation, like, the level of human that was spoken of in New York was becoming like doctors, but it never really appealed to me because I never wanted to work in a clinical hospital setting like full time. And so that's really the only level, like, how do you attain a doctorate would be that way. And it's more treating the symptoms the humans are experiencing as their body breaks and as the planet is thrown out of alignment. And, like, if a planet disappears out of an entire solar system, who knows about it and who's responsible for it? And if you think or suspect that your planet has fallen out of synchronicity with something life-sustaining, who do you alert? I mean, is that... And then there's layers of important people around the world that get higher attention than others. So I'm thinking along those lines because the doctors in New York, they're treating the symptoms that are occurring as the human breaks in the causation of the symptoms the humans are experiencing needs to be addressed. The local humans use this teleportation very rarely to speak on something called climate change and global warming. Those are the two words that they speak on, but not in anything that's intelligent. It's more of like a, don't look at the thing as we move things around. And then this morning, the conversation turns to this. Now, this level of monitoring and computers seems like it might be important. It's not what, when I speak of computing, it doesn't look anything like this. It looks more like a box that you have some key thing to try to make. It's like moving from a push-button television to, like, the buttons disappeared, now what do I do with it to make it work? I mean, like, that's the importance of the level of technology that's been introduced into my whatever. But I realize there are people who have a higher level of something called technology, which uses higher order function and higher, like, using your human to interact with it at a higher statistical data, like collecting imperial information and so on and so forth. So then the conversation moves to somewhere in the human system of humanity. There's private, it says it used to be government funded, now it's privately funded. All these research projects where people are having like laboratories unmonitored in their garages, which seems rather frightening, being that, well, then how do you know if they're part or they're writing viral, like, satellite code and throwing numbers into equations that can't tolerate them? Like, at what level? Like, I don't even have words to go into that realm of physics. But this, what they're showing on teleportation this morning, is a level of conversation which I know doesn't. I can hear the scientists speak because their mind is always in outer space. It's never here on Earth with 2 feet on the floor. I get that. But there is management of the ear things that look like the people on TV. There are certain big signs of danger on the surface of Earth while they're all doing some business deal with hotels and space junk and all other stuff that really, in the grand schematic of the survival of humans as a species, does not seem quite as important as they put onus on it. I know for their day-to-day that's their passion, their hobby, their career field, and I would have been fascinated to hear the humans at that level speak, and I would just be quiet and observe them in their craft and appreciate them for who they've become. The problem is, for me, when I speak, it's because I don't know how they obtained access to that field and why, or how it's grown in some. I mean, I don't, what they're speaking of on this television program, I don't even see in my entire life traveling New York. I don't see that level of scientist. I don't see that level of, like, the contributors, the components, all the jobs that go into building these rockets and things. Where's their corporate base out of? I mean, like, do they even have a facility in New York? Because, again, nobody even spoke of space. We saw the Challenger in elementary school go up and blow up, but then that was like the end of the space conversation for some reason. And there was no careers introduced in elementary school. So I'm confused how some humans, like, their whole lives have been geared to, like, this is a possibility for you, but yet other humans hadn't even heard of, I mean, don't even know how to construct words to fit into it, this, because there's been no exposure to it at all. Totally forgotten about, like, as if they don't exist. No, we're humans, we do exist, we live on the same rock, we both have ears, we both have some form of communication. I'm just confused why this has been able to take off so virally, and there's some of us who can't even find a craft or a hobby or even the person, one person on this big rock that they belong to, that he knows, I know he knows, and so there's other people that know. So why was that relationship hard to get put together when they're able to accomplish this level of possibility somewhere in the world?
Nothing gets by Madonna.
This is a commercial.
In the early
days, space exploration was purely a project of government, but a push toward privatization is well underway. That includes commercial rocket launch.
Now, if it was government and now it's privatization, does that mean that there's no oversight at all? Does that mean that it puts us all in danger? Just curious.
Launches by SpaceX and tourist flights by Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic. On Thursday, a company called Sea announced plans for an orbiting TV and film studio to be launched by 2024. And these ventures are only the leading edge of what's
A floating... So now you're going to train astronauts to defy gravity and G's to go all the way in space to make movies. Why? Why not let them make movies on the ground? I mean, they've been doing it for quite some time. Cinematographers, I mean, it's a whole industry.
what's to come. Investment bank Morgan Stanley predicts that space commerce will become a $1 trillion business sector within the next 2 decades. This morning...
Or is this like one of those paradigm conversations parallel about how do you speak of, like, at the, like, however many people actually run the world, did they have to have a out of this world conversation about some future at some point, and then somebody took that ball of, no, we weren't actually projecting and planning on doing any of these things in that level of out of sight, and then somebody ran with it, because, I don't know, it gets a little confusing. It kind of feels like it's a possibility.
Morning, our own Barry Peterson takes a look at some of the groundwork being done here on Earth to turn space into a center of commercial activity.
To see the future of space, look to the past. To the 1968 movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, when a Pan Am commercial jet docks at a space station with a Hilton hotel.
Your flight leaves in 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Space travel.
I've never
is
even heard of
just
this.
another road trip. One way to get from movie fiction to space travel reality is look behind the doors of this garage in Boulder, Colorado, where Gary Coleman and Joe Pawelski of Cislunar use electricity to melt aluminum strips into these cylinders, a process that needs no oxygen.
Now you can see this is starting to feed down into the rod. And you'll see it. If you look over there, you can see it start to melt. Yeah, like 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. But what we can show you is that the forces from that coil allow us to manipulate the metal.
My question is this just a hobby for this guy? Like, this is what he does? His only human function is melting these rods into this thing? And somebody pays him for this? I mean, he built this machine that he's working with. I mean, does he do anything other than just melt these things in his garage all day long? It's a little confusing. And how do you become an assistant for somebody else's project, which I would gladly have done my entire life, but how do you even find them if now they're hiding in garages? And, I mean, again, where is the directory for this? Where's the network? Like, what do they call themselves? How do you even say, I don't know where I fit, but I need something to do. I know I could fit in somewhere, but I don't know where. Like, where's that level of directorship and help in mentor and guides and philanthropy and charity and so on and so forth? It's confusing.
The research is funded in part by NASA.
There we go. So I wouldn't touch that one.
Because they will get the aluminum to melt in space by sending their equipment into space. It's recycling amid the stars. So just to be clear, when we watch a rocket launch, first stage, second stage, third stage, this is actually what the third stage would be made of. It's like aluminum or something, right?
It is. It's made out of aluminum. Some of the newer ones are made of stainless steel, so we're also going to be working with those materials. But essentially, you have a big tin can that's up there.
Companies are already scrambling to use that aluminum as fuel for satellites. Orbit Fab calls it gas stations in space. And at Neumann Space, a satellite would just make a pit stop. Hervé Astier is the CEO. Someone described this process as like putting gas stations in space. Is that kind of what it is? You can basically refill your tank and keep going?
It is a gas station. I think it's even more like a service station in the sense that you can do more, right?
Today, when...
No, not right. It sounds like you're just adding to space debris and space junk, and you're potentially promoting people to put alternating signaling stations out somewhere that could alter the course of our planetary safety. That's what it sounds like to me. But I know in their career field, it seems like they coach themselves into this idea that they really are doing some. It's like, no, you're in your garage and you're melting aluminum. That's it. On human function, that's all the teleportation device said that you did. I'm just confused as to how these big companies are making big money and moving big things and employing these people that then they brainwash into thinking that they're working on these big projects that will then put us further in danger. It gets a little confusing at couch potato level when I've been left out of the entire process and I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself day to day, and I don't know what to do with where my children are going to fit into anything within whatever they're teleporting as possibilities for something in the future. I've never even heard of these companies. I don't even know how they get funded, how they start. I mean, there's a whole cycle, and I could sit and have a glorious time with people who actually know things in some helpful fashion. I'll stay quiet most of the time unless you need something addressed, but it's confusing how this all fits into humanity and keeping the planet in a Goldilocks zone where we can
satellites run out of
survive.
fuel, they become just more space debris. Debris that can hit other space objects. In the movie Gravity, it wiped out an entire space station. Now, a company called Astroscale is already testing a satellite collector, a step towards recycling debris that could be used for building what's needed for space in space.
Now you can use that to create probably parts of satellites, entire structures.
This looks like an addiction at such a gigantic level of power and authority and assertion and dissertation that it's like, is there no police force of this level of human? You just let the children build whatever they want in theory and words and no, we're gonna do it whether you like it or not.
Structures in space. You can use it as a propellant. Anything that you can use in space from those elements that are already there, it creates an advantage. If you're going to deal with lunar dust, why don't you recreate that? So we have a simulant of lunar dust. It's extremely fine.
Dr. Angel Abud-Madrid is director of the Center for Space Resources at the Colorado School of Mines.
That's where you find it.
Is this going to drive yet another part of the sort of privatization of space?
The moment you start using resources from space, that's going to open up not just the possibility of doing even more science, but it will open up new economic activities in which companies are going to join in and create a whole new ecosphere.
So where some see stars up there, a lot of companies now see dollar signs. Some are developing private space stations like Orbital Reef to launch in the years ahead, with rooms for plenty of experiments, building new machines, welcoming tourists, and a picnic table with the best view this side of the moon.
Pillars of smoke by day, pillars of fire by night, pillars of progress.
And here's another look to the past to see the future of space, the Industrial Revolution that changed human history. Some are already planning factories in space. Is that what's going to happen in space? Another industrial space revolution?
I think the revolution that is about to come in space is about the whole point of use of the resources there to allow us to extend our presence beyond our planet. And I'm not meaning just...
Now, are they recreating in some staged sequence at some level exactly how and what they did, but in action and motion in some out of this theory type of a way, as self-incriminating in order to show how they participated in the revolution on the ground all over the world before aviation threw the criminal children into a whole nother tizzy? I'm just curious. Because what happens when they're told they're not actually able to throw things into space because it's going to cause even bigger management issues at like really important people that do really important things that aren't talked about on teleportation? Because this is like bringing light to something, but then there's a whole nother blind spot, I'm sure of people that do things for a living. I'm just not quite sure where they're missing the couch potato and how that got forgotten about and why everybody's gearing up for all this out of the way and really exotic career whatever.
Humans being going and living on the moon and Mars.
Because the moon is not just what Buzz Aldrin saw when he was the second man on the moon.
Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
It's not desolation. The study of moon rock shows the moon has what we need to live and construct moon bases and build ships destined for Mars and beyond.
If you're going to have humans on the moon, you have oxygen. It's on the rocks. Get it from there. You got water. Water they use for drinking. Water they can split it into hydrogen and oxygen. If you need to build anything, use the dust and the rocks that are there. And not only that, you can use the water to make propellant that then you can launch from the moon, which has 1/6 the gravity of Earth, and then use it to refuel spacecraft in space.
Back in that Colorado garage, Gary Coleman has the kind of boldness that has powered mankind on every journey that ever mattered. I don't want to be disparaging here, but I have to remind you that we're sitting in a garage in Colorado, and this is your operation.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine that you're going to go from here to someday building a rocket ship on the moon that takes us into the galaxy.
Sure.
But you believe that.
Absolutely.
And who's to say he's not right? For CBS Saturday Morning, Barry Peterson, Boulder, Colorado.
Small footprint here on Earth, small footprint in outer space.
Yeah.
Saturdays in space, we could do it. How about
Yeah,
that? I love the gas stations in space, by the way.
Yeah.
And service stations in space. You can stop and get some beef jerky and Swedish fish, maybe a soda.
Yeah,
for the road.
without a doubt.
Well, I love what this could potentially solve because space junk is huge. We know about pollution here on Earth, but I don't think people understand. There is an orbiting pollution problem around this ball that we call our homes.
And as we were reminded while watching the piece, Apple started in a garage.
There it is.
Yes, it did.
All right. How about that?
By apples, we were. This winter, Santa wasn't the only one who's had a lift.
That's the level of speech that I've become accustomed to here. Not because I wanted to, just because that's how the teleportation device transmits information, with literacy being the lowest in content or descriptive factor. But it is just so interesting at there's so many levels of conversation and careers and where people actually were able to reach in the world. And then there's some of us that it is if it's a followed sequence on a timed nuclear calendar and timing schedule, you literally can follow every door being shut on your way and window. So there was no way of escaping this tunnel of nothingness into some future where it doesn't even look anything like what it should have. Star 1978, Star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It is Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. And it's Star 1978, Star 8378. And locally, it seems like the only doctors are the ones that work in the hospitals, because there's no industry here. There's no component manufacturing, or at least that I'm aware of. But again, even like the local corporate possibilities of what is conducting business in New York. I mean, how does one even research that, and for what purpose? And like, I mean, if you're looking for talent, how do they even get hooked into a network? I mean, simple things they haven't explained.